But there are these constant noises which can, so the danger maybe is not those things which distract us, and they do make it difficult for us to focus on things. This is true. But maybe those, in some cases, maybe those are the noises which capture our minds. In other words, those are things that we start to focus on. You know, all the little sounds. And that's what sucks. So now that I mentioned that, pay attention to how many little noises there are going around. And now you're not going to be able to unhear it. It's kind of like last time, a couple classes ago, I was talking about the peripheral vision. And if you start to pay attention to what you see in the peripheral vision, like right now I'm staring at the printer. And I see people moving, I see wrists going around, I see people moving their, swinging their feet around, I see pencils moving, I see people moving around. You see all kinds of stuff. And if you allow each of those things to distract you, well, you're never going to be able to do, fill in the blank, the X, whatever it is. So, for example, as a teacher, if I'm going to let every little thing distract me, I'm never going to get through this lesson. I'm never going to get through this lecture. I'm never going to get through this talk. It's kind of like if you remember, like, especially if you can think back to elementary school. In elementary school, at any given time, you've got 30 students in the room, let's say. How many of those students are doing something wrong they're not supposed to be doing? And imagine if the teacher stops every single time and says something to every single person who's doing something wrong. At what point is the lesson going to be completely lost? I mean, even in here, like I've talked about, how many rules do I have for in here? If that, don't put your head down when I'm talking. And there was one other one that I mentioned at the beginning of the semester. I just kind of let it fly by, but don't have earbuds in when I'm talking. And why not? Because that means you're not really listening to what's going on. But you're already here. And imagine if I stopped every single time and busted someone for doing it. Well, it would just be one person talking, and then you see people putting on hoods, and see people trying to hide them underneath their hair and all that. Not to be a jerk, because I know it's supposed to be all students. We're here for every single one of you. But not really, man. Just like, are you here for every single class? Are you guys here for every single person around you? Of course not. There are people who you're more focused on. And it's largely probably because there's some level of reciprocity between you and them. The things I talk about, I get it, man. It's like coffee. It's not for everyone. I try very hard to take difficult concepts and heady ideas and boil them down, not to make them simple necessarily, but to make them relatable or practical or to as broad of an audience as possible. And notice what I'm saying, as broad of an audience as possible. Because nothing is everything, and nothing is for everyone. So who are these things for? These are things for people who want to think about deeper ideas. If you wanted something that was just simple and straightforward, you've had years of that already. By the time you get to this level, you've had lots of teachers. It's kind of like, why don't I walk around and stand above you and be like, hey, come on, get to work. No, put that away. Come on, you can do this. Because if that kind of an approach worked, I wouldn't need to do it at this level. It would have worked from all of the other years of schooling that you've already had. By the time you get here, that would be part of your default. That would be your person. You'd just be doing that by virtue of the fact, you're already, I don't want to say the word trained, but you understand what I mean when I say this. You're already trained that when you come in and you sit in a desk, and you're not supposed to move the desk, right? You're supposed to just sit. So, it would be more comfortable for many of you, I imagine, if you turned the desk and faced in the direction in which the person was talking. But we're almost trained that we're not supposed to do that. And so that kind of conditioning worked. If the standing above you and forcing you to do every little thing worked, if that kind of conditioning worked, I wouldn't need to do it. It would have worked already by the time you get to this level. And so it isn't, please don't take from what I'm saying that it's a matter of, oh, then psychology doesn't care about us. It's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. I care very deeply about you, which is why I go over some of the things that I go over, because you're not likely to encounter those maybe anywhere else. But also it's because I don't think of you as being down here. I think of you guys as being up here. And I think that you can grasp deep ideas. And I would hate myself if I withheld deep ideas from you with the idea that, well, they're not ready for that. They can't handle that yet. Who the hell am I to decide what you're ready for and what you can't handle? My job isn't to decide that. My job is to take it and to try to present it in a way that you can handle it and that you can get it. Because these are some of the deepest ideas that have ever been spoken by humans. These are the things that literally have changed the world. You know, anybody look up this dude, by the way? Fascinating guy. As it says here, he's a Belgian-American doctor. And then you look at the years of his life, you can start to piece together that he lived through some pretty traumatic stuff. You know, why would he be Dutch and then have become an American? You know, Dutch is Belgium's a pretty, is a pretty nice place. Why would he have felt the need to come over here? He didn't want to. He had to, because as it says here, he was a doctor, a psychoanalyst. He was actually a guy who was in charge of the Belgian resistance. So when the Nazis came into Belgium and took over, he was in charge of he was essentially the psychologist who prepared the rebels to be interrogated by the Nazis. So he said, when they capture you, here are the ways in which they're going to torture you. Here are the ways that you can kind of resist that torture as long as possible, because no one can resist torture forever. But you want to resist it as long as possible so that maybe the information that you have, by the time they get it out of you, hopefully that information is now outdated and useless. And so he was the guy who prepared them to be interrogated by the Nazis. The worst people that we can imagine from history, who were willing to do the worst things imaginable to you, next to the cartels, that was the guy who prepared them for that. And he has an interesting story where he's describing one day getting picked up by the secret police because somebody had snitched, and they knew that he was involved with the resistance and what he was doing to prepare them for it. So the police, he said that the secret police, the Nazis, brought him in, and he just tells the story like very matter of fact. That he just said that they essentially just says they beat me up, but nothing too bad. And imagine that that's just kind of like your view of the world. Like, oh yeah, they just smashed me up a bit, and made me beat my kidneys, but that was all. So then they let me go. And he found out from somebody else that the Nazis intended to arrest him. So when they let him go, he was notified very quickly that they were going to arrest you, dude. So he never even went home. He went to a predetermined spot, gave the right people the right passwords, and then they got him out of there and sent him to England. And then for the rest of the war, he prepared the Allies, Americans, French, Germans. I'm sorry, not Germans, sorry, wrong guys. American, French, and British. He prepared them ready. So he prepared them to get them ready for interrogation and torture. So he wrote a book called Rape of the Mind. And I want to look at a chapter of that. I just don't know how I would teach it to us just yet. But I'm going to teach it either towards the end of this semester, or maybe I'll hold off until next year. But in this one chapter, he explains the brainwashing techniques, essentially how it is to not just to interrogate or torture a person, but how to actually brainwash people and to get people to accept certain ideas and all that. And he writes about it not just for the individual, how to break down that individual and to do it in a mass way. Like some of you maybe have heard of this thing, mass formation psychosis. And it's an interesting thing. Essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like, this idea we can get masses of people to develop a kind of psychosis where they can believe in an alternate version of reality. There was a doctor who said this on the Joe Rogan podcast, and people have come out very hard against him and said there's no such thing as mass formation psychosis. That term doesn't exist. True. But the idea absolutely does. He talks about it. Going back to the 1950s when he's writing Rape of the Mind. He's writing about it that long ago. The fact that you would be told that no such thing exists is an example of that thing existing. In other words, if that doesn't exist, he wrote about it 70 years ago. What do you mean it doesn't exist? He's writing about it back then. That didn't happen. That is itself an example of a mass formation psychosis. People are trying to get you to believe in an alternate version of reality than what really exists. But he's not the only one writing about this. He's just one dude who's writing about it. I happen to like his book a lot, and so I talk about him. But there are other writers who are talking about the exact same thing. So when he's talking, when this comment here is taken way out of context. If you see it within the context of the book, of course, it would make more sense. But that's why I give you guys these things, to make it so that you have to kind of figure out what might have been meant by it. If I gave you the whole paragraph, it would be very clear what he meant by it. That's not the hard part of this. The hard part about this is trying to make some level of meaning out of it. But we live in a world of constant noise. And again, if you see that in context, you know what kind of noise he's talking about. But some of you guys did very well to make it literal. There's literal noise, like I was talking about earlier. But there's also other noise, meaning stuff that meaningless chatter, you know? I hate to do it because I sound like old man Scanlon, I'm going to do it anyway. How much useful, maybe even soul building, if we're going to be so ambitious, how much of that is going on social media? Or how much chatter and useless noise is going on social media?
All the time.
Yeah. And yet you notice how that captures our attention. The stuff that doesn't edify us, doesn't build us up, it's actually the stuff that tears us down and makes us worse, but we get distracted by that. And it's hard not to be. If I'm over here and I say to you guys, you've all asked me about what is the meaning and the purpose of life. I know what it is. And what I'm about to tell you is the most important thing, I promise you. It's the most important thing you're ever going to hear in your whole life. And then Dave gets up and starts doing jumping jacks. What will everyone do? Start looking at him. Whoa, whoa, what's he doing jumping jacks for? That's so weird. Oh my God, what are you doing? Hey, meaning of life over here. Dude, he did like 10 of them. And then what I started to say would be completely lost. It's pointing the finger over there. Don't look here. My voice is changing. Don't look here. Look over there. Why? Because whatever is super important is probably not happening over there. That's probably why people want you to look at that. One of those absolute truths of life that you can imagine is that there are people who want to point you in the direction of everywhere except for the truth. You know? And who those people are, well, that's wisdom. That's up to you to figure out. You know? There are people who absolutely want to point you away from the truth, and there are people who want to point you towards yourself, and there are people who think that they're pointing you towards the truth. You know, but they're not. Being able to figure out those differences between them all, that's wisdom. That's research. But man, that's hard to do. You know? Like I tell you guys about a lot of stuff in here. Don't answer. But I would be curious to know, how often do you guys look up the stuff I tell you? I could be lying to you from beginning to end for all you know. My name may not even be Scanlon. Scanlon might have been the name of the guy who owned the house that I used to deliver mail to when I was a postman. And I was trying to get out of those well, we'll just call them convictions, and trying to escape my past, and I realized this guy seemed to be doing pretty well, and I realized that he lived alone, so I went in, killed him, and took over his life. Changed schools so no one would know who I was. You don't know that that's not me. I had access to him. I was his mailman. I had access to his social security number. When they mailed him new social security cards, I had access to his driver's license and everything. When they sent him the new license, his renewal. You have no idea that I'm even Scanlon. So what can you know? Well, looking stuff up, examining yourself. You know. But I realize also that's difficult to do, man. It's just easier to look at the guy doing jumping jacks. It's more interesting, you know. Because understanding what the world is really like takes time. Understanding truth takes time. Being able to discern and gain wisdom, that takes a lot of time. And there's so much noise around us. Isn't that so much more interesting? You know? But that's the thing, is that it's noise. This is what he's saying. You know? It's a hard thing to get away from also. Because there's noise in all of our lives. I'm absolutely fascinated, for example, by conspiracy theories. I love conspiracy theories because I can imagine why. It's probably because I don't have a television. You know, I get really fascinated by reading about these things because they entertain me. Now, we all know that most conspiracy theories are trash. They're not true. And just a little bit of investigation generally demonstrates that most conspiracy theories are trash. But they're entertaining to me. And one of the ways that they're entertaining to me is to be able to figure out why they're trash. You know, and it's practicing critical thinking skills at the same time that you're being entertained. So I treat reading about conspiracy theories probably the same way that a lot of people treat watching television. You know, it's entertaining, it's interesting, whatever. But there is something to be said there. Yeah, Scanlon, aren't you just entertained by the noise? And doesn't that take you away from discovering the things that you should be aware of? Yeah, I suppose so. You know? And the same is going to be true about almost anything, television, video games, any kind of entertainment. You know, we just have to make sure, though, I would encourage you, just to ensure that the modes of entertainment that we engage in are not the very modes of things that erode our critical senses. In other words, the entertainment that we engage in should not be something that makes life harder for us. It shouldn't be something that makes us worse people. It shouldn't be something that makes us weaker thinkers, perhaps. Because if so, it's just noise. It's not even music, it's just noise. Yes?
Do you mean, like, with what you just said, do you mean, like, the way that, like, social media or, like, you know, like, yeah, just social media, like, makes our, like, attention span, like, shorter? Is that what you meant?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's something that I was thinking about in the back of my mind, but I wasn't going to talk about. But yeah, absolutely. Like, the short attention span is so hard because, man, again, it's hard for me to talk about without sounding like old man Scanlon, but I'm going to do it anyway, though. You can take it or leave it for what you want. Our attention spans suck, man. Our attention spans are short. Think about if there's a YouTuber who you like to watch. Pay attention to the video. You know what jump cuts are in videos? That's when suddenly, like, all of a sudden, like, the angles change. Watch your video and see how often that kind of stuff changes. That will tell you something about our attention spans and what that creator knows about the attention span of their audience. There are videos that you can watch where it's just one person talking into a camera for an hour. What does that person think about your attention span? There are some videos that it'll be a person talking to a camera, but then they'll bring in graphics and stuff like that, you know, music, whatever. Then that's a different attention span. But the jump cuts, that tells you what they think about your attention span. And here's the problem. Here's why that's a problem. What great or deep idea can you encounter in jump cuts? In other words, if your attention span is only 5-10 seconds, what deep idea can you consider? What important life truth can you come to the conclusion of if our attention spans are very, very short? It's one of the reasons I talk to you as long as I do. I mean, I think I was telling you that at the beginning. Like, I looked at some of the old videos, they were like, 30, 40 minutes, and I realized I can cut out certain things. Right now, I cut out certain things from the video, just because of tangents or whatever, and I realized I can get these videos down to be really short, But I don't want to give you a 6-minute video. Because, by the way, even a 6-minute video would be too long for many of us. If I give you an 18-minute video, that starts to push the edges of it. I like to stay around 12 to 15 minutes. If we can't stay in focus for 12 to 15 minutes, again, how much thinking can you really do? How much deep thinking can you do in 5-second intervals, 10-second intervals, even 1-minute intervals? It's darn near impossible to do it in some meaningful way. And so it's a matter of practice. And so I get it why when some of you start to zone out. Like, for example, if I ask you guys, how many of you guys, by show of hands, were thinking about something else in the past minute or two? Yeah? Oh, okay, a few honest people. Yeah, I was too. I was thinking about, I wonder what they're thinking about. And sometimes as I'm talking to you about this, the reason I can sit there and say, well, for example, my jiu-jitsu instructor is a 12-year-old. He asked me a 12-year-old. The only reason I can think to say that is because my mind was thinking about something else while I was talking about something else. That's what then leads you in that direction. But that ability to be able to focus for long periods of time on ideas, on situations, I get it, man. It's like coffee. It's not for everybody. And there's nothing. And if that's not you, then it's not you. That's all. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It isn't a judgment on you. It's just narrating what the case is. All I'd encourage you to do is to practice that skill. Because once you can engage deep ideas, your whole life changes. You start to see the world very differently. And not in ways that make you necessarily angry. Like, it's so easy to be sarcastic. And it's so easy. I mean, and for some reason, we seem to think that the sarcastic kid in class, that means that they're the smart one. That's not the case. It's easy to tear something down. I don't remember if it was in this class, but I was talking about like the statue of Michelangelo. How long did it take David to? The statue David by Michelangelo. Statue David by Michelangelo. How long did it take Michelangelo to make that thing? Years. How long would it take you to destroy with a sledgehammer? Seconds. Anybody can be critical. We don't need more critics. We need more self-awareness. To be aware of ourselves and to be critical of ourselves so that we can make ourselves better people. It's easy to destroy and tear down, man. It's very difficult to build up. And that's one of those reasons that we like to tear stuff down. It takes seconds, and then we're on to the next jump cut. But to build something up, like an idea, a life, a family, a business, ambitions, dreams, these things take time. It can't be done in jump cuts. So it takes focus to change ourselves. Happy Wednesday. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?